Welcome back. We're going to go ahead and roll through some more colonial era slides. We're going to pick up with the British, and we're starting on the slide that's titled "Tension Between England and Spain Escalated." And let's just kind of talk through this a little bit as you guys are reading through your chapters. So England, also known as Great Britain, England, the British Empire, fill in the blank. Today they're calling themselves the United Kingdom. Anyway, so any of those would apply to the same place. England had been trying to make it over to the colonies, and they wanted to start their own, but they just couldn't get over here because the Spanish were too powerful. And this is all going to, culminate in this massive naval battle we're going to talk about here in just a couple of minutes. But before we do that, let's talk about some of the things that were going on before this. Sir Francis Drake makes a name for himself because he becomes a privateer, which is basically a pirate who is authorized by the king or the queen of a country to attack other country ships and basically be paid half of whatever they capture or destroy. It's an interesting setup, but since the British had no real navy, that's what they were relying on. So what's going to happen is in 1588, in 1588, we have this major Spanish invasion. The Spanish Armada is going to try to attack Great Britain because they know that they're the one country that could possibly give them some trouble over in the colonies. And so they're going to go in and try to destroy everything the British have. And that leads to one of my favorite stories I tell my students. Pardon this if it's a bit corny, but you may have heard of a captain who led his men into battle on a ship. And this particular captain, when he led his men into battle, he would always call to his first officer and ask for his red shirt, his red battle shirt. And so anytime they approached an enemy ship they were going to attack, the captain would always call for his red battle shirt. First officer, give me my red battle shirt. I'm going to put it on. And, he always wore that during battle. And one day his first officer said, "Captain, why do you always ask for your red battle shirt? What's the meaning behind this?" And he told his first officer, "It's real simple. When I have my red battle shirt on, if I'm cut, if I'm shot, if I'm wounded in any way, and there's blood running out of my body, the red shirt will show very little, and the men will not be disheartened. They will not, get fearful if they see me, bleeding, because they won't even be able to tell I'm bleeding because my shirt is red, same color as the blood, and so it will inspire the men. And if they were to see me bleeding, of course, they would lose all heart, and they would probably want to, retreat or man overboard, whatever the case may be." And so the same captain, he's leading his men just off the coast of England when the Spanish Armada shows up. And the Spanish Armada, when it comes over the horizon, there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of Spanish ships, and they are coming straight for the coastline of the British Empire, and they are totally outnumbered. The British are totally outnumbered, and they are, for lack of better words, they're scared. They're fighting for their lives. So what happens? This captain, when he sees the Spanish Armada on the horizon and he sees how many ships there are, he turns to his first officer and he says, "First officer, bring me my brown pants." Anyway, all right. So the kicker to the story is that the British Empire, the British ships, smaller, more maneuverable, they're able to somehow, they claim that God was on their side and they were able to defeat the Spanish Armada. The Spanish Armada is completely destroyed, and the Spanish Empire is in big trouble now because the British are able to go across the ocean, and they're able to get over there and start planting colonies and start trying to take advantage of the situation in this new world. So that's 1588. So we fast forward almost 10 years, and almost 20 years, and we have the founding of Jamestown. Now, before Jamestown was founded in 1607, which is a very important date, 1607 is a very important date. Okay, I'm not going to make you memorize all the dates, but 1607 is a very important date. So before Jamestown is founded, just a couple of years after the Spanish Armada is destroyed, we have the attempt at a colony at Roanoke. Now, I wished I had time and, to keep your attentiveness to tell you all these great stories, but Roanoke was founded off the coast of North Carolina. It's the mystery colony because the founder of the colony is going to go back to England for supplies. And when he returns back with supplies for his colony, the colony is completely gone. It's the mystery of Roanoke. You'll see it in your textbook. It'll talk a little bit about it. But let's go ahead and take our attention to Jamestown. Jamestown is founded in 1607, as I've already mentioned. Jamestown colony was founded by people who were trying to make money. This was not a government-sanctioned venture necessarily. This was a private company who was sending people over. They were hoping to find gold, just like the Spanish had found gold and become very wealthy. That's what they were attempting to do here. And so the colony was mostly comprised of young men. There were very few women involved in this venture originally. That's going to change as time goes on. But Jamestown is founded by multiple investors pulling their money together to buy a ship, to buy supplies, and so forth. So Jamestown is the second major attempt to put a colony together in the New World. It's the first permanent English settlement in the colonies. Not the first colony, because the first one, Roanoke, was a disaster. It's gone. The investor lost virtually all his money. Okay, so the London Company is formed to found Jamestown, and Jamestown is founded in Virginia on an island in what's going to become known as the James River. So we go on through our slides here, and we're going to talk real briefly about how British colonies were different from Spanish colonies. As British colonies are going to be founded, this is going to eventually result in small villages, which will become small towns, which will become cities, which will become areas to live, to grow, to work, and to prosper. The Spanish and the French were not coming over to live and to grow and to prosper. They were coming over to take and to leave. That's what they were really there for, with very few exceptions. There are some communities established in the French colonies, and there are some in South America, Central America by the Spanish, but very, very few. In most cases, the Spanish, when they come over, they're going to marry Native American women, which is where we have basically the Hispanic race that's going to devolve. That's going to come from the intermixing between Spanish blood and Native American blood. In the British colonies, what you're going to have is you're going to have Europeans coming over with their wives, making families, and not necessarily intermixing with the Indians. That's kind of a big deal, just to kind of see the difference in how they're going to be operating in the Spanish colonies versus the British colonies, and then the French colonies. The French colonies are going to be they're going to be intermarrying with Native Americans too, but a lot of these guys are going to have wives back in Europe, and so it's going to be, again, very different. There's a few names of various ethnic groups that we're familiar with today. Mestizo is the name for what we call, modern day Hispanics. We have the Creoles, which are Spanish blood citizens that are born in the New World. We have Creoles today. That's not what a Creole is to us today. A Creole today is someone who is mixed from African blood and either French, Spanish, Native, or all of the above. But a Creole today has to have African blood in the U.S. sense of the term. You probably heard of Cajun. We all love Cajun food, spicy food. Cajun has to have a French component to it. So you have French and then some native blood, which could be Native American, or it could be other blood that creates the Cajun group, ethnic group. So that's what we're looking at there. Let's go on to Jamestown, the overview of the entire colony. Let's do a quick review of the colony. We have Jamestown founded in 1607, like we've already mentioned. We have a very unsuccessful start to the colony. We have a lot of problems. We have the entrance of Captain John Smith, who's going to come in and try to get the colony kind of on the roll here, trying to get them back to work, trying to keep them from starving, trying to keep them afloat, basically. And eventually, with the introduction of tobacco from the Spanish, the Spanish were the ones growing tobacco, and they had a monopoly on tobacco. But John Wolfe is going to get a hold of tobacco seeds, and here they're going to grow tobacco, and that's eventually going to make Jamestown become more successful, and they will, for a while, become very wealthy. And then Due to mismanagement, the company, the London company, is going to eventually go out of business. But that's another story that you really don't have to be aware of. This is just kind of giving the background of how Jamestown gets started. So let's move on. We're going to talk about slavery and indentured servitude. And I'm going to try to upload a video for you guys to watch regarding that specific subject. We'll see if that happens or not. But in the beginning of the colony, it was very difficult to get people to come over. And so what we have is we have slaves and we have indentured service. Slavery doesn't arrive in the colonies until 1619. That's when we have our first African slaves. However, we had indentured servants in the colony from basically the beginning. Indentured servants were Europeans who were either poor or they were children who were picked up because they were orphans and they were forced to work. It's a terrible version of slavery in a very similar sense. However, indentured servants typically had specified amounts of time that they had to work. The general number we see is 7 years, but it could be anywhere from 4 to 10 years. And a lot of these folks never survived their indentured servitude, which means they never were freed. So they basically lived as a slave. But indentured servitude was much more popular than slavery because slavery was much more expensive. Indentured servitude, well, they were basically free labor, and all you had to do was get them over to the colony, and they were there. Now, that's going to be the case all through the 1600s, and through the early 1700s, that's going to shift to African slavery as African slavery becomes more affordable and indentured servitude becomes less available, actually. Okay, moving on. Let's go to the Middle Passage. The Middle Passage refers to from Africa to the New World. Now, for just a minute here, we're going to be talking about the Middle Passage, which is getting slaves from Africa to the New World. Now, when we're talking about the Middle Passage, the slaves on those ships, 97% of these slaves on those ships are headed to Latin America, the Spanish colonies, the Caribbean islands, current-day Mexico, Central America, South America. The biggest recipient of those slaves was Brazil, and you can still see the descendants of those slaves there today. 97% are headed to Latin America. It's kind of funny how America gets the blame for slavery when in reality only less than 3% of the slaves are actually coming to the British colonies, which will become the United States. Anyway, that's all political. Let's not get off into that too much. So 14%, approximately 14% of the folks coming to the New World on these slave ships will die because the conditions on these ships are terrible. It's a terrible journey. It was terrible for the people who ran the ships. The people who were the captains and the crew of the ships died at the same rate as the slaves. Doesn't mean they had the same conditions necessarily on board the ships because the crew would have a better place to sleep and potentially better meals and whatnot, but they still died at the same rate because if a disease broke out on a ship, people are going to die regardless of their status on the ship. But the Middle Passage was terrible for everybody involved. Let's do numbers. 12.5 million slaves brought to the New World. Out of that, 388,000, they have records. 388,000 are brought to North America, with the remainder going to the New World. That's over the whole time period of the slave trade. At the same time, during the 1600s and early 1700s, we have 275,000 white indentured servants brought to the New World. So that is kind of a little comparison. Yes, there's more slaves coming in, but that's over a 200-year period, whereas the indentured servants were over about a 100-year period. So a few more numbers there for you. Okay, and then the next slide, I have a map of the triangular trade, shows you how these slaves were traded primarily, and what we're doing is trade. Once the British colonies are established, they're going to be manufacturing rum from sugar. So the rum from the sugar is shipped to the west coast of Africa. At the west coast of Africa, we're going to trade the rum for slaves, human cargo, and the human cargo will be shipped to the Caribbean islands where it will be traded for sugar. and that sugar will be shipped to the British colonies. All right, I'm about to the 15-minute mark on the video, and I don't like to go over that mark, so this will be considered part 2. We'll pick up with part 3 here shortly, and we'll be done.